Welcome to our annual general meeting of Interchurch Health Ministries Canada. And the reason it is Canada is because we are nationwide. We do have a Saskatchewan affiliate, and they are well represented here by Harold and Elaine Hesje and Laura Van Loon. I am going to introduce Anne-Marie Moeller, who will introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Carol. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So it's my pleasure to introduce Daniel Whitehead, who's the CEO of Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries. He spearheads the move to meet and equip churches to support mental health and well-being in their communities. Daniel's other roles include an adjunct at the faculty of Regent College, a member of the International Initiative for Mental Health Leadership, a member of the International Network on Theology and Mental Health, a member of the advisory group for the Center for Spiritual Health and Disability. Previously, he spent 10 years in full-time vocational ministry and served as a senior pastor of a church for 8 years. Daniel hails from the UK, but now resides in Vancouver, British Columbia. He is married to Annie and has 2 young children. He's also a certified mediator and a double theology graduate from Regent College. Welcome, Daniel.
Oh, thank you, Anne-Marie. Thank you for having me. Wow, that all sounded very impressive. And it's all true, which is the most important thing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to make my presentation work now, and there's going to be no technical issues. We've all decided that this event is going to be 100% on technical issues not happening. So let me just do this. And there we go. Look at that. That's wonderful. I'm not at all surprised. Great. Well, let me start by acknowledging that I am speaking to you from the traditional, ancestral and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish and Coast Salish peoples here in Vancouver. And it is my great joy to call this place a home, a place I've called home for 8 years. I moved here with my wife and 2 small children for a year. And that was 8 years ago. So last year we all became Canadians as well. So I can say with you all what a wonderful and beautiful place we live, and a proud Canadian. So let me give you a little overview of maybe I'll tell you a little bit more about myself before I jump into that. I was a senior pastor of a church, and that was in the UK. And there was a day when my wife turned to me and said, "You know, Dan, I can't remember the last time I saw you smile." And I realized I'd spent about a year leading a church with absolutely no emotional life. I was numb. And this set me on a journey of actually moving away from that vocation, which led me to Vancouver to study. And in the context of that journey, I was led to this small nonprofit called Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries, which, like many small nonprofits, was really struggling. And by God's grace, remarkably, Sanctuary has grown and grown and grown to the point where 6.5 years later, or nearly 7 years later, since I started working at Sanctuary, we have moved from being 2 part-time people working in Vancouver to being the equivalent of 13 full-time people working at the moment. To date, over 70 countries have accessed the resources that we create, and 250,000 people have been through the Sanctuary course, which I'm going to tell you about. So it is truly remarkable, the journey we've been on. And in this historic moment, I'm not at all surprised with the mental health crisis that is unfolding before us, the mental health crisis that has well and truly begun, and we're in the middle of. And I say this to you with a slightly tender heart today, when a member of our church, a young man, 18-year-old, died by suicide yesterday at our church building. So and 2 weeks ago, I lost another friend to suicide, who is a young family. So these things, as you know, in your vocations, are happening. And I think there is a unique moment for the church to step into. And that's going to take bravery, and it's going to be scary. But I actually believe the role of spiritual community has so much to offer to someone at a point of crisis. It won't solve everyone's problems, but I do believe that there is a facet there that remains largely untapped in many churches because of fear and stigma and not even knowing where to begin with this subject. And that's where Sanctuary comes in. I'm going to start by giving you a bit of an overview of Sanctuary, all in the next 17 minutes. A little overview of Sanctuary. To introduce you to Sanctuary, I'll tell you about who we are, what we do, and I'll share about a few other resources we have and others we're creating, and then I'll wrap us up for some questions. So let me tell you about Sanctuary. So Sanctuary has a mission. Our mission is Sanctuary Mental Health Ministries equips the church to support mental health and well-being. And we have a vision that goes with that mission, which is that we envision a future where the church plays a vital role in supporting mental health and well-being in every community. I actually dream of a day when the church becomes famous for its care for people in the midst of crisis. And it would be easy to scoff at that dream because sadly, many of us have experienced unsafe environments with our own journeys and journeys of those we love. But I do see signs of hope. I do see signs of hope emerging as I survey the territory. So that is Sanctuary's ultimate dream. We believe the church has a unique role to play, and part of that is really founded in this idea, this research that shows that at a point of crisis, many people will turn to the church before they turn to a mental health professional. And so Sanctuary's goal is to really make sure the church is equipped to know what its role is and what its role is not, to know how it can support and how it shouldn't support, so that it can truly be a sanctuary, a safe place for all people. So what do we do? Well, we produce free resources. They're all free. That's the good news. I remember chatting to someone that Anne-Marie introduced me to in Toronto, and I was giving them the sales pitch, not that I call it that, and she's a minister, and she was kind of, if I'm honest, a little standoffish with me. And then she finally said, well, how much does it cost? And I said, it's free. And then we became best friends. So it's a funny thing there. So we give everything away. We believe and trust that God has called us to serve communities around the world. We're currently translating our course into German, Russian, and Romanian. It's already in Spanish. And we don't want to create any barriers for people to engage. And we trust and rely on the generosity of donors, foundations, organizations, denominations, churches to support our work. So we give everything away. And what we do is we obviously raise awareness, we reduce stigma, we support mental health, and we promote mental well-being. And when we think about that word sanctuary, it means a place of refuge and safety. And we chose this name because, as I've said, we truly believe the church should be the safest place in the world to talk about, learn about, and share vulnerably about mental health support and recovery. And I often wonder, how did we, as members of the church, how did the church come from this, God in human form, God incarnate, naked on a cross, screaming out, my God, why have you forsaken me? How have we got from that vulnerability, from that, that demonstration of ultimate vulnerability, to a church that very often feels like it needs to feel polished and perfect? I don't understand how we've moved to this place, and I think it's time for the church to invite people into that vulnerable posture that God invites us into through our Lord. So this is what Sanctuary does. We create resources that help churches to open up conversations, and one of the main ways we do that is through the Sanctuary course. Now, the Sanctuary course was developed in collaboration with theologians, pastors, psychologists, and people with lived experience of mental health challenges. And actually, when I think about the foundations to Sanctuary's approach, we have it's an 8-session course. It's kind of like a mental health alpha course, if you know about the alpha course, in that the format, you can pick it up and use it. And if you can facilitate an alpha course or a small group, you can facilitate a sanctuary course. You don't need to be a mental health expert to run a sanctuary course, because the sanctuary course is not therapeutic. I mean, I actually think it is inadvertently, but that's not the purpose of the course. The purpose of the course is there to help people build a shared framework and a shared language for how to engage in this subject. Because one of the things that struck us 7 years ago was that everyone wanted to have a conversation, but no one really knew where to begin. The conversation is so big and scary and moving so fast. So we decided back then, as a little local ministry with 2 part-time people, we said, why don't we dare to be the organization that helps every church everywhere have a conversation about mental health and faith, that builds that framework from which the community can continue to build their ministry and hopefully partner with other organizations that can help them in their journey. And many of those organizations we now partner with as an organization. So the Sanctuary course is 8 sessions long. It focuses on lived experience. It always brings in theology and clinical best practice to help us think about different subjects from different lenses and perspectives. And when I think about the foundations of Sanctuary, our founding director, the Reverend Dr. Sharon Smith, who was one of our 2 founders, along with Reverend Carolyn Penhale. But Sharon Smith, if you think of her vocation, she was an occupational therapist for 20 years. She did a double master's in theology. She got ordained in the Church of England. She did a PhD on the intersection of spirituality and schizophrenia. So she has this clinical, theological, church, research background. And then the 5th strand to her, what makes Sharon so unique, is that 15 years ago, her husband, Alex, died by suicide. So Sharon also brings this lived experience perspective. And at Sanctuary, we really believe the gold is in listening deeply and listening well to people's lived experience stories. And if we can bear to listen long enough, we think there is much we have to learn about ourselves and about God and about a journey or a recovery journey, which is non-linear, but makes space for people to heal in their own time. And that really undergirds Sanctuary's whole approach and really undergirds the course that we've created, which is free. A few other resources we've worked on, because I'm really just giving you a snapshot today. I don't have time to go in detail. But Faith, Grief, and COVID-19 was a resource we filmed over Zoom in 1 month. It was a challenge we set ourselves, and we did it. And that has done phenomenally well, just helping people during the pandemic, but even afterwards, to process feelings of grief. Where do we go with these feelings of loss that many of us are feeling in lots of avenues of life? When a loved one dies by suicide is a resource we created in partnership with the Catholic Association of Mental Health Ministers. That follows 7 families who've lost a sibling, a parent, or a child to suicide. And it is from a Catholic perspective, but it's really seeking to destigmatize the subject of suicide in the Catholic Church and to help the Catholic people who are Catholic to address many of the inaccuracies that people hold when they think of the subject of suicide and what happens to a loved one when they die. So that's a bit of a groundbreaking resource we launched last year. At the moment, we're in the course of launching an album of songs with the Porter's Gate. We are creating worship music to help churches sing about this subject. So we released the first single just 2 weeks ago. We're releasing 5 singles throughout the summer, and the full album will launch in September. And we've had a number of well-known musicians, people that many of you would know and sing their songs. People like Brian Dirksen, Matt Maher, All Sons and Daughters, various other people have been involved in that project. So that's a really exciting one that we've been working on. We have a blog, we have a podcast. In fact, in June, we'll be sponsoring one of our ambassadors, Dr. Hilary McBride, has recorded a podcast on spiritual trauma. So we have sponsored that and produced that. That will be an 8-session resource for people who have been traumatized in the context of their faith. And it will be therapeutic. It will be there to help people find healing on their journey. We have a small app that helps people to have difficult conversations about mental health. And we have a youth resource coming out next year. We're filming this summer. So there's a lot of things going on. I think there are another 9 resources in the works at the moment. So for us, it's always about supply and demand. There's a great need, and Sanctuary is still a relatively small organization that's trying to keep up with that. So all those resources are free from our website. and more to come. So if you sign up for our newsletter from our website, you'll get notifications of all of these resources that are coming out when they come out. So I'm just going to come into land here before I take some questions. And I'm sorry it's been such a brief snapshot. I can and do talk about Sanctuary for hours in my life. It's not difficult for me to do that. But John Swinton, who some of you will know, John was a psychiatric nurse for 20 years and is now a world-leading academic and foremost thinker on the subject of mental health and faith. He's also chaplain to the King of England, which I just think is really cool. Was appointed by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth just before she died. And John, here's a wonderful quote that John, who we work very, very closely with. John is a very dear and close friend of mine. John says, understanding and responding to experiences of mental health and mental health challenges is profoundly important for both church and society. Sanctuary is one of those prophetic voices that calls our attention to important things and seeks to equip God's people to be the kind of healing community that they are intended to be. The work of this organization is invaluable. Oh, thank you, John. That's very kind. And then finally, I'll just mention we have a charity patron, and that is the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. Back in 2020, Archbishop Justin tweeted about Sanctuary's work for 4 weeks in a row, which absolutely blew our socks off. We had no idea that was happening. And we reached out to his team and asked, would he be willing? And they said, be warned, he always says no, but you can ask. And remarkably, he said yes. So we are the only organization in North America that has the official approval of the Archbishop of Canterbury, who, as we love to point out to our Catholic brothers and sisters, is a very dear friend of Pope Francis. Archbishop Justin says mental and emotional well-being is key to human flourishing and at the heart of God's desire for each one of us. Many of us will encounter challenges in our mental health over the course of our lives, and it's vital that the church is equipped with the tools to respond effectively and with compassion. And that's why he got behind Sanctuary. So with that in mind, you can connect with us. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can sign up for our newsletter at sanctuarymentalhealth.org. Please follow us, stay in touch. I know all the work that you're doing very much coalesces with the work we're doing, and we really believe in what you're doing, and we are grateful for what you're doing. And, if any of you have a spare $100,000, you could always donate that as well. Just, if you, no one's ever responded to that request, ever. I'll keep going with it though, but yes, please do follow us and please help and please connect us with people, other denominations, organizations, people of influence, foundations. You all know people. We'd love to connect with people. We are an organization that believes in the power of partnerships. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you a quick 2-minute trailer for our course, if that's okay, just to give you a flavor of what it is, and then I'll take some questions in the time I've left. So let me just quickly switch from this. I'm gonna do this, and this is the Sanctuary course.
Something had happened that triggered so much anxiety for me that my mind couldn't stop, and I was getting increasingly depressed. I felt like life was about to end.
I was struggling with anorexia and bulimia. I was so broken.
I'm not in any danger, and I'm just breathing like something bad had really happened.
I thought, I'm always sad. If you dig deep, there'll be this river of sadness that flows underneath everything.
Sense of the world closing in on me. Horrible, horrible experience.
I started to have delusions. I was not reading reality properly. I was really scared.
I thought, there's no way out of this.
It's hard to see a way that this could be different, but hang in there, get help, because it really can be different.
The way I performed or looked externally didn't seem to align with what other people thought depression looked like. They're like, oh, well, you're okay. Oh, well, you're in school. Oh, you're getting A's. You're fine.
Culturally, mental health issues is just not recognized in the Asian American experience. There was certainly a kind of a stigma attached to it.
I felt so much shame. I couldn't let somebody else into that world.
It's critical to normalize. Don't stick our heads in the sand and not recognizing there is someone in your congregation that is dealing with some issue related to mental health.
We all need to lament together, articulating our sadness and recognizing that even in our sadness, God is there. Your struggles, your suffering, your diagnoses do not exclude you from belonging. Those things are welcome to be talked about.
Resist the temptation to seclude, to stigmatize people experiencing mental health challenges. Listen deeply, come alongside, and treat as a holistic, multifaceted person.
Mental health is important because it cuts to the very heart of our experience of being human beings.
Do some work and do some learning. Find empathy and compassion for real people having real experiences.
When there is a hand that can guide you through God, it will be inspiring to know that there's someone there who may be able to help you.
God is here, and I think a really good church community would say, and we are here too.
Okay, there we go. Time for some questions.
So I'm going to try and go to the chat. Hi, it's Emily. Daniel, I'm going to go to the chat because there's a few questions that popped up during the presentation. Maybe we can start with those. Anne Marie asks at first, what are the things you are most proud of when you were describing, I guess, some of the things that you've done with Sanctuary?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the true answer is I'm most proud of the fact that we're impacting a lot of people in lots of places, and we get that feedback all the time. Some of the things I get very excited about, like I've just seen the journey of a very small organization that was struggling. I mean, it's still a struggle. It's just different struggles. That I don't think ever won't be a struggle. But I've seen that, and last month we were at the Royal Albert Hall with 5,500 people, and they were singing songs from the Sanctuary Songs album. And we took the foremost evangelical conference in Europe from singing songs about, they talked about their big vision, and we were singing songs about, I want to be where my feet are. And we were singing songs about Christ in the depths. And we were singing songs about take it easy because God already loves you. So I think to see Sanctuary's influence on shaping the church and some of the way that the church is, that is the goal. We actually, we're all church people. Many of us are ordained. I am, but we really believe a shift needs to happen. So I'm very proud of the times when I see that shift happening in the church.
Thank you. I'll go to the next question in the chat. Why are churches so afraid of talking about mental health? I think that's a question a lot of us might have.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complex question, and there's actually so many ways, that there are so many angles I think you could approach it from. I think even just to throw out a few, and these are not necessarily the best answers, but the ones that come to mind, you think even about the study of the mind that probably really started in a popular way with Freudian psychology. Freud was a master of suspicion. He was at least perceived as this atheist that was kind of anti-God. So I think it kind of set things on the wrong footing. And I think our whole culture has done a really lousy job of holding in tension science and faith. And I think that's a false dichotomy. That's a false binary. And if you don't take science seriously, it's hard to take mental health seriously, because we've learned more about the human brain in the last 20 years than in the rest of human history. So there are things we're learning all the time about the way God has fearfully and wonderfully made this organ and its role and its place in our whole person as biological, psychological, social, and spiritual beings. So I think that's a big threat to a number of people. And then just many of these subjects are just so heavily stigmatized from the media, from a total amount of silence. Like, people just haven't talked. I mean, have you heard a church talk about suicide? It's very rare for that as a subject to be talked about openly. And yet the reality is the statistics we see, startling statistics. This survey was done of young women in America, and this segment, a decent segment of young women, so 25% of them had made suicide plans. This was not like this was literally during COVID, 25% of young women had done that. So I think there are things we need to talk about, and it's just playing catch up. The church is often behind. I love the church, but it's normally 20 years behind. So Sanctuary's trying to help it catch up. Yeah, more I could say.
So someone else is asking, Keith is asking, could you please share the Twitter handle again, please? I think it might have been, was it on the PowerPoint? Will that be shared?
Yes, I will share the PowerPoint with you. Absolutely.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Excellent. And then is there a training program for potential course leaders, or is the material self-explanatory? What qualities must a leader display?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you really, I mean, we have a leaders facilitators guide that kind of guides you through this is how we expect a leader to lead. And really those things are more about creating safe space for people, so it'll lay out, if anyone feels uncomfortable at any time, let them leave the room or pause, or, and share the air. Don't let one person dominate, and don't make sure you don't dominate, facilitate. So I think anyone with kind of basic course facilitation skills, the resource is entirely trauma informed. It's written in collaboration with people with lived experience. So it's very honoring of people's story. So I think, there is a facilitation guide, and if you can facilitate a small group successfully, you can facilitate this. It's laid out and it's self-explanatory. Yeah.
Okay. Another question. Do you have any resources to equip churches to be more welcoming to those with bipolar illness?
That's very interesting. So we are creating a number of resources. These are all subject to us finding funding, but one of the first resources we're going to create is a module on bipolar disorder. That's actually feedback from people using our course. So we're going to create a resource on depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. They'll be the first 3 modules, so people can do the course, and then if they want to go deeper, they can take a module. And the plan is to create like many modules in the years ahead to help people really go deeper. The other thing I would say is, in the course, there are people with that diagnosis. There are 2 people with that diagnosis. So the course materials themselves will address that. And we also have another film we made about one of my colleagues, our director of development, Marco Costomo, who's become a real advocate for mental health, and particularly living with bipolar 1. So there was a beautiful little film we made about Marco's story, and he wrote a lovely piece, which you'll find on the blog, which was all about Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night and how that spoke to him as someone. So there are a few things around, but we're going to create a film-based resource that's happening.
Great, thank you. Another question is, have you been involved in any collaboration with non-faith organizations in society successfully?
Yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of intent and plenty of discussions. I do think people do get thrown off by Sanctuary's strong commitment to the church. I mean, I was in an environment last night with all these wealthy business people. I don't know why I'm there, but I got invited to be there. And as far as I'm aware, most of them, I don't know if they're Christians or not. So often I'm pitching Sanctuary as a very practical tool to go like, there are a lot of people that attend churches. And if you could equip all those people to know how to offer appropriate care and support at a point of crisis, you would be helping meet a very real need in society. And our approach is, we will work with anyone, whatever your faith is, whether faith or none, but our vision of well-being includes God. It's just like, we're not going to apologize for that. We think ultimately a vision of well-being includes Jesus. It includes, Father, Son, and Spirit. And so, yeah, as long as you can accept our vision of human flourishing, we'll work with anyone. And there's definitely things to learn. And there have been many instances of people doing the course who do not have faith, who have still massively benefited. And we hear stories of people who've kind of been drawn into relationships in the church because of that, which I think is a really interesting byproduct of the course.
Okay, thank you. And one more from Janice. You have a comment, Janice, not a question. Go ahead.
I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me? Is it okay? Okay, Daniel, thank you very much. That was lovely to hear. And all of the parish nurses who are listening right now are going to probably agree with me on your vocabulary. Your verbs and your vocabulary are so parallel to the work that we're doing. I'll just throw some back at you. Walking alongside, listening deeply, equipping, encouragement, supporting, creating safe spaces. What you're doing through Sanctuary and what we're doing as parish nurses is so parallel. And I see a huge opportunity for both groups, parish nurses in ministry and the Sanctuary program. I see partnership maybe is a strong word, but I see both of us being able to feed off of each other because we're all doing the same thing. You have a huge mental health focus. We have whole person health focus, but the same terms, the approach of alongside and equipping and listening, we're doing it. Yeah. So we just need to keep that in the front of us, that you're doing good work, we're doing good work. Let's see how we can help each other continue doing good work. That's where my comment is. Compliments to you, Daniel, for your work.
Oh, thank you, Janice. That really means a lot. Sanctuary loves partnering. Honestly, we love partnering with people. That we really believe in that. We're not trying to take over the world. We can't do everything. And I do think the principles, and you picked up on that, Janice, the principles of what Sanctuary has to teach the church or anyone who wants to hear it about how to offer care to someone at a point of crisis are applicable to all margins of society. If you can care for someone in the midst of crisis, in a mental health crisis, it's really about being a good friend. How do you be a good friend to someone when they themselves
in a mental health crisis? We have to learn to run towards them, not run away from them. Yeah. And how do you teach a church? And that's what you're doing. You're encouraging the church to run towards the person who needs help with open arms, not with stigma, not with labels, not with, oh my God, I'm not equipped to do this, but reaching out, because we can all help.
Amen.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question. I'd like to ask how you encourage the rest of the congregation to be welcoming, because often people that have mental health issues also have trouble with finding a place to live, and so they come to church and they would be smelly, for example, and not be somebody that you'd particularly want to sit next to. So it's more than just learning how to talk to the person with a mental health issue. It's how do you talk to the whole rest of the congregation and get them to buy into it.
Yeah. And that was the reason we created the Sanctuary course. My frustration with Sanctuary's work when I joined it was we'd do lots of workshops, but we were always preaching to the choir, because the people who sign up for a workshop already know it's important. And I was always saying, we need the whole congregation. It's the people who are good people, but they don't understand that they need to be involved in the conversation, because I've never met a person in my life decide like, oh, when I'm 50, I'm going to get a diagnosis of bipolar 1, or no one plans that, but these things happen, and no one thinks, I'm plans on meeting someone in crisis. So we need to get the whole community ready. We need to get the whole community engaged. So the Sanctuary course is really an attempt to engage a whole congregation. Like, could we get every small group in the church to run through this? And just thinking about this young man in our church that died by suicide just 2 days ago. He joined the church recently, lived with depression, anxiety, as I found out. And we go to a very large church. But, I've been sort of lamenting and grieving and going, why did no one say, once a week, everyone put your hand up if you've run the Sanctuary course. And then you say to people in the congregation, if you're new here, anyone with a hand up is a safe person to talk about what's going on for you. Now, maybe I'm not being realistic enough, but I think in this historical moment, churches need to do things like that. They absolutely do, because there are people who are suicidal. And so I'm kind of, in this situation, I'm kind of battling a little bit, because I'm saying we have to find a way to talk about suicide. We want to respect and honor the family. But if we don't acknowledge what's happened, there are others, what they will hear is, we can't talk about this. And so it is very complex. But we do need the whole community engaged. And mental health is everyone's business, because everyone has mental health. So we'll keep at it. And just one more thing, there was a church that ran the Sanctuary course, and one of the things they did as a direct result of it was they bought an industrial washer and dryer to help people in crisis just do their cleaning, their laundry, because they recognized that was something that often people struggle with. So it's a very practical thing. And they also introduced the Lament Sunday, which means every second month they just lament. They don't put a bow on it. They just lament faithfully. So I'm seeing some beautiful things emerge out of the Sanctuary course, which we're creating a resource that will tell people about these things in the months ahead.
There's one more question in the chat from Val. Do you have any association with the pastoral care counselors from the Canadian Association of Spiritual Care? They would be very good resources for this program.
Yeah, I would love a connection to them. Funny enough, we've got a connection to the same organization in the UK, but we'd love a connection. So no, we don't. But if someone wants to introduce me, I would welcome that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. I wonder if when you're talking about the whole community being essential for this ministry, the key person very often is the clergy. I think parish nurses have discovered that it's only when the clergy buy into what we're doing that our ministry is effective. Like, how do you get clergy on board? They face the congregation each Sunday. What does their preaching say to the congregation about issues around mental health? And do they even deal with that?
Yeah. Well, so Henry, we've asked the same questions, and one of the things we're doing, it's going to be a long project, but we're just about to embark on creating a mental health Bible. So the British Bible Society actually reached out to us, and this is really a theology of mental health wrapped into a study Bible, so that we can get people faithfully preaching in a way that isn't going to trigger or traumatize people on the subject. So there's a very practical thing we want to help. Sanctuary's approach is not just the Sanctuary course. It's actually, we need to be hitting this at different levels. There are more pastors seeking out support, I think, because of their own mental health languishing, especially during COVID. And I've also, when I started at Sanctuary, my approach was always exactly the same. Top down. You find the person of influence, you influence them, and then it filters down. But what's been really interesting, and we do that, we actively go out and seek denominations and leaders, but the bottom-up approach has some merit to it, because Sanctuary's work is free, anyone can pick up the Sanctuary course. And so what we're finding is there are some churches where people in the churches are saying, well, my church isn't going to do it, I'm going to do it. And then they're going to their pastors and saying, we've run this course and this is really good. So we try to do a both and approach, top down and bottom up. And some of that depends on denominations as well. Some denominations need the buy-in of a bishop or and others don't. Yeah.
There was another question from Sue Duncan, or?
Oh yes, it was just a comment. I can't tell you how much we appreciate that your resources are free. We work on nothing, and a lot of times we pay for everything that we give to our patients. And I'm really excited by what you've shared here tonight, especially in the area of mental health. Thank you.
Oh, that's so good. Good. Yeah, use our resources. They're free. And we have a team that can help you. If you have any questions, just email us.
Thank you. And I just want to share, Daniel, when I shared your website with our parish priest, because he'd like to get some programming and also just for grief, he went through the modules for Catholics, and he was so impressed. He said, I'm going through them. I'm doing them all. And he says, this is really good. So he was very, very, very pleased and accesses your website now. So thank you.
Oh, that's so good. I'm not, and I don't mean this with any sense of arrogance, because it actually is very little to do with me. I am the face of the organization, but we have such talented people that I stand by every resource we've ever created, because we've got top-notch people working on them who are doing it out of passion. So I'll pass that on. That's so lovely to hear.
So I guess it's time for me to thank you, Daniel. I actually came to Sanctuary through knowing Reverend Dr. John Swinton. John Swinton actually has done a webinar for ICHM, and it was really well received. And so I'm familiar with all your resources, but it's just been inspiring to hear your your version of what church roles can play. And it was great to meet you in Toronto. I think, you talked about partnerships and networking. I think I arranged for you to meet 3 or 4 people during your visit here. And that's what it's about, right? It's about partnerships and networking. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, everyone. Unsurprisingly, I'm not going to join the rest of your meeting. Please don't be offended. It's just not my thing. But but it's been lovely to meet you all, however briefly. Hopefully I'll meet you in person someday. But yeah, please stay in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bless you, everyone.